The boy who spoke too calmly. The courtroom smelled of polished oak, old paper, and judgment. Every whisper echoed like guilt. Every glance cut like a knife. A teenage boy sat alone at the defendant's table. No lawyer beside him, no parent behind him. Just a small figure in a too big gray hoodie, sleeves covering his hands, hair slightly disheveled from a morning that had started with police sirens instead of breakfast. The nameplate before him read, Elias Rowan, age 17. The bailiff's voice thundered. All rise for the Honorable Judge Preston Hale. Chairs scraped the floor. The judge, a man with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a reputation for crushing arrogance under polished shoes, walked in, his robe swaying like a flag of authority. He took one look at Elias and smirked. So this is the so-called prodigy who thinks he can defend himself? A child playing lawyer. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Elias didn't flinch. His eyes, calm, unreadable gray, and stayed fixed on the table. Judge Hale leaned forward. Do you understand the seriousness of this trial, son? You're accused of hacking into the state education system. That's a felony. You could go to prison. I understand, Elias said softly. The prosecutor, Ms. Dalton, sharp, elegant, and visibly irritated to be dealing with a teenager, adjusted her glasses. Your Honor, I'd like to note for the record that the defendant has refused public counsel. Despite being offered an attorney multiple times, he insists on representing himself. Hale scoffed. Represent himself? What's next, a toddler cross-examining witnesses? This court is not a playground. The audience chuckled again. Reporters, parents, curious onlookers drawn by headlines of Teen Hacker Genius Faces Judge. Elias finally looked up. His voice was steady, unafraid. With respect, Your Honor, the Constitution allows me the right to self-representation under the Sixth Amendment. I've read the case law. Ferretta v. California, 1975. I believe I qualify. The judge's smile faltered just for a moment, barely, but Elias caught it. You've been reading, Hale said dryly. Good for you. But this isn't a high school debate club. You're in a real court, son, and I'm not patient with arrogance. Elias's gaze hardened slightly. Neither am I. A ripple of murmurs filled the courtroom. Even Ms. Dalton blinked, surprised at the quiet confidence in his tone. The judge leaned back, adjusting his glasses as if deciding whether to crush this boy or humor him. Fine, proceed. Let's see what brilliance you think you possess. The opening shots ends. Dalton stood, her voice slicing through the air. Ladies and gentlemen of the court, what we have here is not a genius but a delinquent. A boy who thinks intelligence excuses crime. He infiltrated the state's education database, altered student records, and stole confidential files. His actions jeopardized the integrity of our entire system. She turned toward Elias, eyes glinting with disdain. And now, rather than take responsibility, he plays games on pretending he's a lawyer. Elias said nothing, simply taking notes with a small pen. Old-fashioned, not digital. His handwriting was precise, his fingers steady. Ms. Dalton continued, We will prove beyond any reasonable doubt that this young man committed cybercrimes with full intent and malicious purpose. He may look harmless, but the evidence will show otherwise. When she sat down, the room buzzed with agreement. The judge nodded approvingly, clearly enjoying the rhythm of a predictable case. Then Elias stood up. His movements were deliberate, calm, almost rehearsed. He adjusted the microphone, looked directly at the jury, and spoke in a quiet, measured tone. My name is Elias Rowan. I'm 17. I didn't hack the system for profit or revenge. I hacked it to expose something the people in this room would rather ignore. Corruption. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel. You will stick to relevant facts, not conspiracy theories. Elias didn't look away. The facts are the conspiracy. A dangerous, calm Judge Hale's face hardened. Watch yourself, boy. You're treading on dangerous ground. I know exactly where I'm standing, Elias replied softly. Ms. Dalton laughed under her breath. Your Honor, this is absurd. He's performing. If he wants to talk about corruption, maybe he should start with his own actions. Falsifying data, manipulating code, deleting records. I didn't delete anything, Elias interrupted. I uncovered files that were already hidden, files showing how the board manipulated student scores to favor certain schools and donors. The courtroom erupted in murmurs again. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough. Elias slowly turned toward the judge. If this trial is truly about justice, shouldn't the truth be heard, no matter who it exposes? The silence that followed was electric. Ms. Dalton sneered. You think you're clever, don't you? No, Elias said, just observant. The judge narrowed his eyes. You're done speaking for now. Mr. Rowan, sit down. Elias did quietly, but as he sat, a tiny smile flickered at the corner of his lips. Something about that unsettled everyone in the room. The mockery hours passed. Witnesses testified. A digital forensics expert claimed to have traced the IP address to Elias's laptop. Ms. Dalton's arguments were methodical, powerful. Every word painted Elias as a calculating hacker. Elias listened, expression unreadable. At one point, Judge Hale leaned down from his seat and said, almost tauntingly, I've seen children try to outsmart the law before, boy. It never ends well. Do yourself a favor, plead guilty. Save your parents the shame. My parents are dead, Elias said. The courtroom froze. The judge blinked, caught off guard. I see. No, you don't, Elias murmured. But you will. The evidence twist. When it was his turn to question the witness, the judge sighed audibly. Proceed, counselor. Let's see what the boy wonder can do. Elias stood. Thank you, Your Honor. He faced the digital expert. Mr. Green, you testified that the IP address was traced to my computer. Is that correct? Yes. Was my computer in your possession during your investigation? Yes, it was seized as evidence. Did you maintain a proper chain of custody? The expert frowned. Of course. Elias picked up a paper from his folder. Then can you explain why the timestamp logs show remote access to my system after it was in police storage? Ms. Dalton shot up. Objection. He's referencing evidence not submitted to discovery. Elias smiled faintly. Actually, it was. Page 43 of Exhibit C, but it was conveniently left unmentioned in your summary. The judge frowned, flipping through his own notes. Is that true, Ms. Dalton? She hesitated, just long enough for the room to feel it. It must be a clerical oversight, she said quickly. Elias turned back to the jury. Or maybe not. The courtroom buzzed again, the judge's patience thinning. You're walking a fine line, son. I'm just asking questions, Elias said. That's what lawyers do, right? The audience chuckled nervously. The same people who had laughed at him earlier now watching with cautious curiosity. Something was changing in the room. The mockery deepens during recess. Judge Hale cornered Elias privately. You think you're clever, boy? You think quoting case law makes you special? You're just another troubled kid trying to sound smart. Don't mistake your book smarts for wisdom. Elias looked at him, calm as ever. Wisdom isn't measured in age, Your Honor. It's measured in what you do when you have power. Hale's expression tightened. Careful. I am your power right now. Elias met his gaze. Not for long. The judge froze, thrown off by the unshaken conviction in the boy's voice. Rumors and whispers. When court resumed, the atmosphere had shifted. Reporters whispered. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Something about the boy's composure, the precision of his words, the quiet authority, felt off. Too refined, too trained. Where did this kid even learn law? Someone muttered in the gallery. Rumor spread like wildfire that maybe Elias wasn't who he claimed to be. Ms. Dalton tried to regain control. Your Honor, this defendant is manipulating perception. He's trying to confuse the jury with irrelevant details. Elias turned, voice soft but cutting. Truth isn't irrelevant just because it's inconvenient. The judge slammed his gavel. Enough philosophy. Stick to the case. Elias nodded slightly. Of course. But this is the case. He reached into his folder and placed a single USB drive on the table. I have something that might clarify everything. Ms. Dalton laughed. You're not allowed to introduce surprise evidence without proper disclosure. I did disclose it, Elias said. To the court clerk 3 days ago. Check the file. The clerk hesitated, flipping through records and then froze. He's right. It's logged. The judge's jaw clenched. Play it. The unseen video, the screen flickered on. A security recording appeared, dated 2 months earlier. The footage showed a man in a suit, Superintendent Rourke, the head of the State Education Board, meeting in a dimly lit office with another official. Rourke's voice filled the courtroom. If those test scores leak, we lose millions in donor funding. Change the numbers. I'll handle the fallout, the other man replied nervously. But that's fraud. I know it. And if anyone finds out, we'll pin it on that hacker kid. Easy scapegoat. Gasps exploded through the courtroom. Judge Hale went pale. Ms. Dalton's papers fell from her hands. Elias stood silently as the video ended, his calm gaze sweeping the room. The truth, he said quietly, was hidden in plain sight. The judge's fury, Judge Hale slammed his gavel repeatedly. That video is inadmissible unless authenticated. You will not grandstand in my court with theatrics. Then authenticate it, Elias said. You don't give orders here. Hale barked. You think you're some kind of prodigy, but you're just a boy meddling in matters beyond your understanding. Elias finally raised his voice, just slightly. I understand corruption when I see it. I understand power that mocks innocence. And I understand that the law is supposed to protect the truth and not bury it. The courtroom was dead silent. The judge stared at him, trembling with controlled rage. You're done speaking. Bailiff. But before he could finish, a voice shouted from the back of the room. Your Honor, that footage is real. All heads turned. An elderly man stood up. It was Mr. Carson, a retired IT auditor from the board. I worked with the superintendent. I've seen that office. That's no fake. Chaos erupted. The judge banged his gavel, shouting for order, but the tide had already turned. Elias stood quietly amidst the storm, his eyes focused, almost sorrowful. He'd known this moment was coming, he'd planned for it, and yet, beneath the calm, something deeper stirred, a secret not yet revealed. As the courtroom erupted in confusion and outrage, Judge Hale glared down at the boy who had just shaken the pillars of his courtroom. Who are you really? He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Elias looked up slowly. His gray eyes were steady, unblinking. Someone you shouldn't have underestimated. Start with part 1. The shift in the room. Elias took a slow breath and stood. His posture changed, no longer defensive or uncertain. He looked taller somehow, older than his years. I didn't come here to play lawyer, he said. I came here because no lawyer would take this case. Every firm I approached refused after the board threatened to revoke their licenses or funding. So I studied. For a year, every night, until I knew the law better than the people hiding behind it. Ms. Dalton folded her arms, trying to mask her unease. You expect us to believe you taught yourself constitutional and criminal law from scratch? At 17? Elias met her eyes. No, I didn't have to teach myself from scratch. The judge frowned. Then what are you saying? Elias hesitated, just long enough for tension to coil around every word. I wasn't always a student. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. What do you mean? Judge Hale demanded. Elias glanced toward the bailiff. May I approach the bench, Your Honor? The judge hesitated, suspicious but intrigued. You may. Elias stepped forward, his sneakers silent on the marble floor. He placed a single folded paper on the bench, official, embossed with the seal of the Federal Bar Association. Judge Hale squinted, then froze. His lips parted, but no sound came out. This can't be real. Ms. Dalton frowned. What is it? The judge slowly lifted the document for all to see. It was a license to practice law, issued under the name Elias Rowan, escudite date of certification 2 years earlier. The shock, the courtroom collectively gasped. You're telling me you're a licensed attorney? Ms. Dalton sputtered. You're 17. Elias nodded slightly. Technically, I was licensed at 15. I passed the bar through the state accelerated jurisprudence program, a provision that allows prodigies with university equivalency to sit for the exam under supervision. You're lying, the judge whispered, disbelief and something else, fear, flickering in his eyes. Elias tilted his head. You can verify it. Case file 18421B, Rowan v. State Board of Bar Examiners. They tried to block me, but the appellate court ruled in my favor. The clerk, pale and trembling, began typing into her system. Seconds later, she looked up at the judge. It's true, Your Honor. He's in the registry. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs exploded. The words genius lawyer teen started forming on every journalist's lips. But Elias didn't smile. He didn't bask in it. He simply said, This was never about me. The past unveiled, Judge Hale's voice cracked slightly. Then what was it about, Mr. Rowan? Elias turned toward the jury. About what happens when the system forgets the people it's supposed to protect. He walked slowly across the room. My mother was a teacher, 30 years. She loved her students, believed education was the one weapon no one could take away. But when the board started falsifying performance data, her school lost funding. They accused her of negligence. Fired her. She fought back and lost. She died last year of a stroke. The room was silent. Only Elias's voice remained. I found the files they hid. Proof she was right. I tried to give them to the authorities, but no one listened. Then the superintendent labeled me a hacker, a criminal. So I did the only thing I could. I brought it to court myself. Ms. Dalton, visibly shaken, whispered, You manipulated the trial to expose them." Elias nodded. "I didn't manipulate anything. I followed the rules, and better than they did." Judge Hale sat back, staring at the boy before him, unsure whether to feel awe or shame. "And you let us mock you, why?" Elias's eyes glimmered, not with pride but pain. Because the arrogance of power only reveals itself when it thinks no one's watching. The words landed like a punch. Even the court stenographer paused, forgetting to type. The system strikes back M's. Dalton, desperate to regain control, slammed her folder shut. "This is an outrage. The defendant is engaging in theatrics. None of this changes the fact that he accessed government servers without authorization." Elias turned to her. "Then let's talk about authorization." He clicked a button on his laptop, connecting it to the courtroom projector. A string of code appeared, lines of access logs, authorization IDs, and timestamps. "These," he said, pointing, "are the credentials used during the supposed breach. The access key belongs not to me, but to the superintendent himself. It was his account. His signature. I only traced it." Ms. Dalton's voice faltered. "That's impossible. Those logs would have been secured." "They were," Elias said, "until someone altered them. But they forgot one thing. Every server backup leaves ghost data. I restored it." He pressed another key. The projector displayed an email, signed by Superintendent Rourke, ordering technicians to sanitize all trace logs post-audit. The room gasped again. Judge Hale rubbed his temples. "Good Lord." Elias looked at him calmly. "You asked for the truth, Your Honor. There it is." The emotional collision. One juror, an older woman with kind eyes, suddenly spoke. "Young man, you did all this alone?" Elias hesitated, voice softer now. "Not entirely. I had help. From people who believed the system could still be saved. A retired attorney named Carson, some professors, and my mother's students. They raised funds for the filings. Every signature on that petition meant something." Tears welled in her eyes. "Your mother would be proud." Elias looked down. "I hope so." The silence was heavy, sacred almost, like the courtroom itself was holding its breath. Even Ms. Dalton's tone softened. "Elias, you could have gone public, sold the story, made yourself a hero. Why go through all this?" Elias looked at her with quiet conviction. "Because heroes chase glory. My mother taught me to chase justice." The judge's reckoning. Judge Hale leaned back, his mask of authority cracking. The man who had mocked the boy hours ago now looked small, cornered by the enormity of what had unfolded. "Mr. Rowan," he said, his voice trembling with something that sounded almost like remorse, "you've exposed a level of corruption that this court cannot ignore. But your methods—" "I know," Elias interrupted gently. "They weren't clean. But when the law becomes a cage, sometimes you have to bend the bars to open it." The judge stared at him for a long time, then sighed. "I'll order an immediate recess to verify this evidence." The gavel came down, but no one moved. Reporters flooded toward the front, whispering frantically. The world outside was already spinning with headlines. The quiet. Before the storm, as people began to file out, Judge Hale leaned close to the clerk. "Find out everything about him. Where he studied, who sponsored him, and everything." But Elias overheard. He smiled faintly. "You won't find much. I don't belong to any school. I passed my GED at 10, college equivalency at 13, and law at 15. The records are sealed under youth privacy statutes." The judge blinked. "So you really did this all yourself?" Elias nodded. "Justice doesn't wait for permission slips." The judge didn't respond. His gaze drifted, distant, haunted, as if seeing his courtroom for the first time in years. The hallway encounter. Outside the courtroom, the air was chaos. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and questions came like bullets. "Elias, are you really a licensed lawyer?" Did you hack the education board? What's next for you? Elias kept walking, silent, until a voice stopped him. Mr. Rowan. He turned. It was Judge Hale standing in the hallway, robe off, just a man now. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I mocked you because I saw arrogance. But maybe it was something else, conviction. Elias studied him. People mistake conviction for arrogance when they've forgotten what it feels like. The judge nodded slowly. You're right. You remind me of someone I used to be. Elias tilted his head. Then maybe you can still be him. For a long moment they stood in silence. 2 generations of law, one rediscovering conscience, the other redefining it. Then Elias said, It's not over yet. They won't go down quietly. Judge Hale's face darkened. You think Rourke will retaliate? Elias looked toward the courthouse doors where black cars waited in the distance, tinted windows, quiet engines. He already has. The cliffhanger, the glass doors burst open. 2 men in suits strode in, sharp, cold, deliberate. One flashed a badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're here for Elias Rowan. The crowd gasped. Judge Hale stepped forward. On what grounds? The agent's eyes were ice. Interference with a federal database. New evidence just surfaced. Classified material tied to his server. Elias didn't move. He simply stared at the man, expression unreadable. Ms. Dalton appeared behind them, whispering furiously into her phone, face pale. This isn't possible. Someone's framing him again. The agent stepped closer. Mr. Rowan, you need to come with us. Judge Hale's voice thundered. You will not remove him from this court without a warrant. The agent smiled coldly. We have one. He handed it over and signed, sealed, and dated. 15 minutes ago. Elias's eyes flicked to the signature, and then his calm cracked for the first time. It's Rourke, he whispered. Judge Hale's expression hardened. They're trying to bury this. The bailiff reached out protectively, but Elias shook his head. It's okay. He turned to the judge, his eyes steady once more. If truth is a crime, then let them arrest me for it. The agents closed in, handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. The cameras flashed. The crowd shouted. And Elias Rowan, the boy the judge once mocked, was led away in silence, head held high. As the door slammed shut behind him, Judge Hale whispered to himself, This isn't over. The verdict. The holding cell was colder than truth. Concrete walls, flickering light, the faint hum of fluorescent tubes that sounded like they'd given up hope a long time ago. Elias sat on the metal bench, wrists cuffed, staring at the thin sliver of sunlight bleeding through a barred window. For the first time since the trial began, the genius attorney in a teenager's body looked tired, not broken, but worn, the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting monsters who wear human faces. A voice crackled through the intercom. Visitor for Rowan? He looked up, surprised. The steel door opened with a groan and Judge Hale stepped in, without his robe, without his entourage. Just a man in a wrinkled shirt, holding a folder that looked too heavy for its size. Elias blinked. Didn't expect to see you here. I didn't expect to be here either, Hale replied, sitting down across from him. But after what happened in that courtroom, I couldn't just go home and pretend the system was fine. He opened the folder, revealing printed emails, confidential memos between Superintendent Rourke and several officials. The subject lines were damning. Containment strategy, Rowan contingency, judicial cooperation. Elias frowned. You got these how? I have friends who still remember what justice means, Hale said grimly. They risked their jobs to get this to me. Rourke's pulling strings in the department. Your arrest warrant? It was pre-written before your hearing even began. Elias leaned forward, eyes sharp again. He planned it. He planned everything, Hale said. He knew if you exposed him, he'd need to discredit you fast. Elias exhaled slowly. Then we have to expose that too. The judge gave a sad smile. You're still fighting even here. Of course, Elias said. Truth doesn't stop just because I'm behind a wall. The turning point, a guard appeared. Time's up, Hale stood. I'll buy you more time. I've requested an emergency hearing. The FBI's warrant process has holes, enough to stall. Don't lose hope, Elias. Elias looked up. I never do. The judge nodded once, then left. A man who'd once been a symbol of arrogance, now carrying the weight of redemption. As the door closed, Elias looked back at the window, whispering under his breath, Mom, I'm close. The storm breaks the next morning. Chaos reigned outside the courthouse. Protesters filled the steps, holding signs. Free Elias Rowan. Truth is not a crime. Justice for the teacher who spoke up. News vans surrounded the plaza. Every network had the same headline: Teen lawyer genius arrested after exposing corruption. Inside, Judge Hale walked through a sea of reporters, jaw set. He ignored their questions and except one. "Judge Hale, are you reopening the case?" He paused just long enough to say, "Justice doesn't close when it's inconvenient," and walked on. The courtroom was already full when he entered. Ms. Dalton sat at the prosecutor's table, looking 10 years older than she had 2 days ago. Her confidence was gone, replaced with a grim sort of respect. Elias was led in, wrists still cuffed, flanked by agents. The audience erupted. Cheers, applause, anger, disbelief. The judge had to slam his gavel 3 times just to silence them. "Mr. Rowan," he began, "do you have representation today?" Elias smiled faintly. "Yes, Your Honor, myself." Hale almost smiled back. "Of course," the counterattack. Dalton rose first. "Your Honor, the defendant is now under federal investigation for unauthorized access to classified material." "The evidence against him is fabricated," Hale interrupted. The courtroom gasped. "You'll forgive my tone, counsel, but this court has received credible proof that the so-called federal warrant was manufactured using falsified authorization codes." Dalton's jaw dropped. "By who?" Hale handed her a document. "By Rourke. Signed under a proxy account traced to his department terminal. Verified this morning." Dalton's hands trembled as she read it. "My God." The judge turned to Elias. "It seems, Mr. Rowan, you were right again." Elias didn't gloat. "I wish I wasn't." The judge continued. "Given these developments, I am ordering Rourke to appear before this court under subpoena." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters nearly fell over each other. And then, the doors burst open. The return of Rourke. Superintendent Rourke entered, flanked by lawyers and arrogance. Silver hair, polished suit, fake calm. The kind of man who thought justice was something you could buy wholesale. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this is outrageous." "I am a government official. You are a suspect," Hale snapped. "Take the stand." Rourke hesitated, eyes flicking to Elias. "You think this child can outwit me? He doesn't understand how the world works." Elias met his gaze evenly. "You're right. I don't understand a world where people like you win," the crowd murmured. And for a fleeting second, Rourke's mask cracked. But he composed himself and took the stand. Hand raised, the cross-examination, Elias approached the stand, calm, deliberate. His cuffs had been removed for the hearing, and as he walked, the sound of his sneakers against the marble floor felt like a countdown. "Mr. Rourke," Elias began, "you've held your position for 15 years?" "Yes. And during that time, have you ever authorized data modifications within the education database?" Rourke smirked. "Of course not." Elias tapped a key on his laptop. The screen behind him flickered to life, displaying an internal memo with Rourke's signature authorizing data score recalibration. "Then what's this?" The room gasped. Rourke's smile faltered. That's not fake." Elias cut in. "Already authenticated. Chain of custody verified. Timestamp to your IP address." "I don't recall," Elias interrupted again, tone rising just enough. "You don't recall falsifying records to inflate donor-linked schools' test results? You don't recall scapegoating teachers who spoke out, like my mother?" Rourke's face turned red. "This is slander." Elias leaned forward, eyes blazing. "No, this is justice catching up." Judge Hale pounded the gavel once. "Answer the question, Mr. Rourke." Rourke's voice trembled. I was under pressure from the board." "We needed funding." "So you destroyed lives to get it?" Elias's tone softened, but it hit harder than any shout. "You took everything from people who believed in the system you corrupted." Rourke looked down, no answer left. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The confession Hale's voice was steady, heavy with finality. "Let the record reflect that the witness has admitted to falsification and obstruction." Elias closed his laptop slowly, his work done. The crowd erupted, half in cheers, half in disbelief. Rourke's own lawyers were silent, defeated. The judge turned to Elias. "Mr. Rowan, your charges are hereby dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go." Elias didn't move. His voice, calm and quiet, carried through the chaos. Your Honor, it's not just about my case. What about the teachers they fired? The schools they defunded? The students who lost scholarships because of rigged numbers? Hale nodded slowly. You're right. This court will initiate a full review. Every name, every record, every falsified report will be reopened. You have my word. Elias bowed his head slightly. Then maybe justice has a chance again. The aftermath later that day outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Not lighter, but honest. Elias stepped into the sunlight, blinking against the cameras and flashing lights. Reporters shouted questions, but this time he stopped to answer one. What's next for you, Elias? He smiled faintly. I think I'll finally go back to school. The crowd laughed, not mockingly this time, but warmly. Ms. Dalton approached, hesitant. You know, I spent my whole career believing the system worked because it was built by smart people. But you showed me it only works when brave people keep it honest. Elias looked at her kindly. Then maybe you can help keep it that way. She nodded. Count on it. The quiet moment. That evening, Elias sat on the steps of the courthouse alone for the first time since it began. The chaos had faded. Reporters gone. Streetlights flickering on one by one. He looked up at the sky, the kind of twilight that holds both endings and beginnings. He whispered softly, Mom, we did it. The wind stirred the leaves, gentle and warm like an answer. Judge Hale stepped out, joining him on the steps. You know, they're already talking about making you a legend. Elias chuckled. Legends are stories people tell when they don't want to change. I'd rather be a reminder. Hale smiled faintly. Of what? That truth doesn't need permission to speak. The judge looked at him, proud, humbled. You've changed more than this court, Elias. You've changed me. Elias stood, brushing off his hoodie. Then it was worth it. They shook hands, a gesture between equals. Not judge and defendant. Not man and boy. Just two souls who'd finally remembered what justice felt like. As Elias turned to leave, Hale called after him. Where will you go now? Elias smiled. Wherever there's silence to break. He walked down the courthouse steps, each one echoing like punctuation marks at the end of a chapter. The world watched, and for the first time, it listened. Epilogue. The letter weeks later, Judge Hale received a letter with no return address. Inside, a short note written in precise, steady handwriting. Justice isn't a title. It's a choice you have to make every day, even when no one's watching. E.R. Hale smiled, folding the letter carefully. He placed it in his desk drawer, right next to his gavel, because sometimes even judges need reminders.